This is an informal community call where we talk about all things jobs to be done.
Yeah. All right. I'm going to get started here really quickly with this month's hot take, kind of leading into Melissa's talk. So one of the things that I think is that makes jobs to be done really effective is that it's not just about a framework, right? Clayton Christensen really looked at what are the common denominators that drive successful innovation. And so at the heart of jobs to be done, I found that it's really about overcoming resistance and driving creative ideas forward in a wide variety of different business contexts. And that's what I think is so interesting about Melissa's background is that she's worked in startups, she's worked in banking, she's worked at Amazon and FAANG. So she has all of these different experiences with research and jobs to be done that she's here to share with us today. And I will turn the floor over to her in just a moment. But really quickly to get things started, welcome to Jobs to be Untangled, our monthly Jobs to be Done meetup that Jim and I host. Jim is my co-founder at the Jobs to be Done Toolkit. Hi, Jim.
Hey, everybody. Jim Callback, co-founder of Jobs to be Done Toolkit and author of the Jobs to be Done playbook. Looking forward to our conversation today.
Yes. A couple of quick announcements. Made some updates to the Foundations of Jobs to be Done mini course at the beginning of the year. So if you haven't enrolled in it, take a look. It's a really great introduction to jobs to be done through the perspective that Jim and I have developed, which is about making it easy and quick to get up and running and have a structured discovery process. We also have our upcoming workshop, Applying the Core Process, coming up in February. So it's Monday, Wednesday, Friday at 2 hours over lunch. And we will walk you through the entire core process from beginning to end to give you a sense of how it can really unfold during your discovery process. And you can take those qualitative interviews, convert it into data. Now you have insights that you can activate within the organization. So that's what we cover. If you want to do, a nice practice session, keep an eye out for a discount code in the follow-up email to today's event. And team coaching. So Jim is available if you want somebody to come in and take a look at the work that you're doing and give you some feedback, help you stay on track. There are lots of different ways that you can use that time with him and your design or product team. So if you're interested in learning more, reach out. We can give you some information. And finally, our next Untangled, we meet at the last Tuesday of every month at noon Eastern time. So there'll be links to register for the February event as well in the chat. All right, so I'm going to give Melissa McGrath a quick welcome. Hello, I'm so excited to have you here. As I started to mention, I've known Melissa for a long time, and the first interaction that we ever had, I remember very vividly because she rolled up her sleeves and dug right in and did it in a way that was like really motivating for everybody around her. She felt like a natural member of the community, like I had known her and been networking with her for years, even though I just met her. And since then, I've had the pleasure of following her career. We've both been president of NYC UXPA a couple of years back, if not consecutively, maybe just with a small gap. But either way, we were involved in a lot of leadership meetups and Melissa just took everything by the reins and kept things under control, focused on the community. And I really appreciated that about our interactions when we first met and started like kind of working together. So here we are, like 10 years later, and Melissa's been involved in jobs to be done heavily for a while now. And so I'm excited to have her share her experiences with everybody here. Welcome, Melissa.
Hi, thanks. Yeah. It's awesome to come talk to you guys. I rarely get a chance actually to look at jobs to be done across my career, so it's fun to be able to take this lens and sort of share it with you guys. Um, so yeah, I'd like to start actually at JP Morgan, and let me share my screen. So let me take you back. It's pre-COVID, right? I joined JP Morgan in 2018. And that's when I first was introduced to jobs to be done. By Lawrence Lipkin, who had brought it, I believe, from Fidelity. He worked with Jen Cardello, and they had a lot of success as part of a change management strategy. And so he brought that package along with other frameworks to JP Morgan, where we formed, I think, the first centralized UX team. So again, and maybe you've seen something similar, UX designers, UX researchers, content strategists, et cetera, design technologists, all working together. And then some of us embedded within specific lines of business or verticals. So yeah, unfortunately, I would say though that at JP Morgan, there wasn't a lot of fertile cultural ground for the introduction of JP Morgan the way that it was rolled out. And I'm sure maybe some people here have experienced something similar. So although it didn't take off as well as I believe it should have when we were working at JP Morgan, I don't credit that to the theory itself, but more to the cultural context, if that makes sense. But it wouldn't be the last time that I worked with Jobs to be Done, certainly not. From there, I took all of my learnings really about Jobs to be Done and my transformed skepticism about it because, well, honestly, I took umbrage, I think, a little bit with the vocabulary that I needed to learn and then have others learn, especially in the context of maybe some of you guys are working with employees as your users. So the word job has already been used there in a very specific context. So that was a little bit strange, I would think sometimes. But overall, what I did find and that I brought with me after JP Morgan was how powerful the framework was for being strategic, the potential it had to link many different teams across verticals, of course, and also how easy it was to sort of sell this story. Just that simple, what is it, Theodore Levitt? Somebody help me out. Like, it's not, people don't want the quarter-inch drill, right? You want the quarter-inch hole. Just that's all it took. That's all it took. And so was a key seminal moment for me to understand, like, oh, there's something here. There's something here that people just hang on to immediately, whether it's sales, marketing, product, UX designers. They just that one quote was all it really took for some people to just, okay, now I have heads nodding in the group. People understand that, they get that. It's just this simple quote. It's underpinned by a theory that helps shift the frame, the narrative, how we think about it from product feature to actual human need. All right. So from here, I went to Bread Finance. And Bread Finance was a fintech. At the time, it's a buy now, pay later fintech. Some competitors out there you might be familiar with are like a Klarna or an Afterpay. It's a white label product. So we were partnered with like an Ulta or a Best Buy, etc., to offer more financial flexibility in terms of making payments for products. So I would say it was much easier to get buy-in here than it had been previously at JP Morgan. Again, I think the culture has a lot to do with how successful you can be, or how much time it takes actually to be successful might be a key piece of that. So I had sort of free reign to propose a jobs to be done study actually in partnership with a data scientist. So this is the first time where I got to think more about how to quantify jobs to be done. And I would take this with me onto Amazon as well and refine it. So at Bread Finance, typical, we did job interviews where I was able to get that really rich qualitative data that I then brought into workshops with my stakeholders so that they could have hands-on experience with the actual primary data and, make it more fun and interactive and have them have ownership over it. I'm sure that's everyone here has heard of that, or at least is familiar with that a little bit. And then this is the part where it might diverge a little bit. We launched a survey using Anthony Ulwick's model that he outlines. So what we're doing is we've outlined each job, and what we want to do is measure perceived importance for each job and perceived satisfaction for each job. Now here, it's just one product. I'm working with one team, one set of stakeholders. And so we had a limit of 20 jobs. So that's 40 questions though. So what you're going to see is if it's not incentivized, if you're not paying people to take this quiz survey, you're going to see a lot of drop off. So that's a challenge that we had to deal with, especially at scale. From there, we were able to create a composite opportunity score, again, outlined by Ulwick. I didn't come up with any of this myself, to be able to rank the job statements, right, by this composite score that looks at both satisfaction and importance, to create that opportunity score. And from here, you can take this and you can reuse this in so many different ways. You can take it and build a dashboard if you want. You can do a monthly report. You can do a heat map of your jobs map to sort of help people visualize, like, how are things going right now? You can build trend statements off of this. So this is a great starting point. I do find that when you quantify things, people tend to take notice in a different way. People love numbers on a slide. I think we kind of know that. So this, again, I was starting to pick up on a shift of, hey, there's something here. There's something here. I want to keep pulling this forward. Another thing that we did, because I had the opportunity to work with a data scientist, is do a little bit of machine learning and do some k-means clustering, kind of looking at the natural affinities of using existing data plus the interview data plus the survey data to look at, okay, naturally, where is there kind of like alignment or grouping between user groups against maybe some of the jobs to be done to create quantified personas. So that was just like another opportunity. I had a lot of fun to sort of sit down and say, hey, we're collecting a lot of data. What else can we do with it when I'm partnered up with somebody who has access to these machine learning models to build different patterns and relationships for us? Okay, so then I took this to Amazon, and I want to give a little background here. I joined the only team at the time, the only UX team that was purely dedicated to jobs to be done. And Amazon calls their jobs to be done customer experience outcomes. That's just the language that they use. I don't really know where it came from. But I believe the first CXO framework or jobs to be done framework in Amazon language was published by Prime Video. And this, I would say, is an example, but you can kind of see it says acquire and orient, find and discover, watch, more universal jobs for completeness and coherence. You have share and connect and then maintain. So it's, again, that journey. This is V1. I believe by the time that I left Amazon, they were on V4. So this model evolved, and with it came a formalization of jobs to be done at Amazon, a group formed to sort of be, I want to say the bar raisers, we call them, or set the standards for what jobs to be done should look like at Amazon. And so, again, I'm coming into a culture where this already exists. And so there's a lot of existing infrastructure to help me build this program because it's the language for it already exists, that it's already been partially formalized there. But I think that that's really helpful when you're starting any type of program to have those little seeds already planted for you. Another thing to know about coming into Amazon and working on jobs to be done there was, like, there were quite a few teams that already had a lot of documentation on their own success using the jobs to be done program. And a lot of the ones that I found were most successful in terms of their high level of visibility were how they connected to existing metrics of the team. And when I say high level of visibility, I mean there was a team using a jobs to be done framework that had monthly reports going to the CEO and then quarterly reports going to the board of directors above that CEO. So that's the highest level of visibility I've ever witnessed before. And it gives you a lot of motivation to think just how far of an influence this framework can take. I think that that's the strongest example, again, that I've ever seen. And I've seen, it wasn't the only one, but it was like the highest level of visibility at Amazon there. There was also teams working on frameworks that were one of the starting points for roadmap planning on their team. And just again, an example of how strategically powerful that this framework can be. I've seen it be. And I love that. So the specific team that I joined at Amazon was within logistics and looking at this sort of broad range of support all around this delivery experience, from even air cargo to long haul truck drivers to the Amazon vans that you see delivering packages directly to customer stores, your doors, my door, everybody. Now, because there were 12 products involved in this team, and maybe 60 plus stakeholders, I really had to think about scale differently here. This wasn't bread finance. It wasn't doing one product, product team at a time. This was 12 products, and they had existing frameworks, some of them all at different levels of completeness, and I would say at all different levels of quality. And some of the markers of quality I want to pick up on here is, you know, as UX researchers, we would say, like, well, how close are we to the primary data? Did we talk to users? Is this built on our own assumptions? What did we build this framework off of? And also different levels of hierarchy, sometimes mixed. I'll touch on that a little bit later. But my purview was really to take this portfolio of jobs maps, elevate them, and then quantify them at scale. So this was really an opportunity for me to work with UX designers to sort of train the trainer here so that they could go out and work with their embedded product teams to do the work themselves. Again, this is a great way to establish ownership, but at the same time, I believe the trade-off here is not everyone has the same background in jobs to be done. Not everybody has the same beliefs about it and how they want to use it. They might be looking just their product team at a very narrow space, a very small piece of the journey, and maybe doesn't map all very well when we collect all this data together. So what we did was work with the team in batches and then start with a pilot team to launch our first survey with the team that we thought had the highest level of maturity and quality with their framework. And I had a pretty major breakthrough in the quantification strategy, how, the launching the survey, how we designed the actual survey or experimentation tool itself. We found a way to eliminate, here's that survey. We found a way to eliminate actually all of the importance questions and instead focus on something we felt was had greater validity than just importance and was tied a little bit closer to actual user behavior and using metrics that we were already collecting. So therefore, we reduced this total survey length and also drop-off rate. And we believe using a quantification model that was stronger. So we launched this survey. We got some existing data. We piloted a dashboard, and then teams started running there and built up steam. I took it and we did a road show. I sat in different product teams meetings and did a quick 10 minutes. Hey, this is what we did. You guys should be excited. We can come do this with you, come quantify with you, team with us. And yeah, it was a great experience, but I would say I'm still not done. I would love to experiment more with um, even myself feeling like, well, what I would love if I don't have access to a data scientist, what could I do on my own? So it's kind of a personal exploration for me of, well, what would it look like if I explored some ways to use some machine learning models on this? What could I do? Could I do k-means clustering? What other options do I have to use existing data to strengthen these models? Some other questions I have are, how do we automate quality checks on frameworks? Is there a way to do that? Again, maybe statistically to strengthen them. Or if you have jobs that are at different levels, like I'm sure if any one of us who've tried to create jobs have struggled with this, right? What's the right level? How do we ladder up or ladder down? How do we mix these? How do we organize them? So let me give you an example, real life, of one related to maybe Amazon shopping that we're probably all pretty familiar with. I buy something, I don't need it, I don't want it anymore, it's broken, it doesn't fit, whatever, I need to return it. Maybe the one layer of a job could be, I need to return something I no longer want or need. Then how do I do that? I need to request a return. And then as part of that return, I need to print a return label, right? I might argue, some teams might not, that print a return label is actually a job. And so when you mix print return label on the same job map and the same level with return something I no longer want, that becomes a little bit problematic when it comes to quantification, because you're kind of splitting these jobs up and putting them at equal weight, but they are maybe not. Maybe they're nested in this way. So a lot of examples and challenges around that, but I would love if in the future there's a way statistically to eliminate or collapse some of these jobs just based on how similar of a score that they have, was one sort of thread I'd like to pull on maybe in the future. Some other challenges I wanted to talk about with you guys. How do you think about jobs where there's little user choice, right? And maybe some of us are working in an environment where you have to design jobs for employees, right? Or in a B2B context. That's always going to be a little bit more challenging. And I think some of that comes down to choice. And one extreme example would be designing jobs for a warehouse worker where the product team needs to consider very highly specific tasks, which might be take a box, open the box, fill the box, close the box, move the box, like things like that, that like level of like extreme detail. Are these jobs? How can we think about satisfaction for a job that you have to complete no matter what? And some of these, maybe we might think to include more holistic employee experience measures like overall job satisfaction. You might include something like productivity or uh, you know, level of cultural satisfaction, feeling of belonging, workplace health, mental health, things like that. But that becomes hard because for another related problem, you might be thinking of an overall job map where your team only owns a slice of the journey. Another concrete example here is to think about, for me, I worked with a team that owned part of the experience for someone who was applying to and starting work as a warehouse worker for Amazon. And the marketing team, though, owned the job listing page. That's not something my product team was responsible for, but we owned everything after that, including the application process. However, the job listing page had language that directly affected the success of the application process because it set expectations, or, for example, set up success or defeat if you chose the wrong shift schedule. Just making something up here. So I'm sure we all have sort of examples like that, just to say, yeah, I've had a lot of success using this framework, and I think there's so much more here. There's so much more to do and things that I want to explore. I think I'm especially enamored with going down this path towards quantification, because I do find that linking, with existing metrics helps gain visibility and strategic influence. I don't think it's necessary, but I have just found in my career that it does help with that. And so I'm interested to keep exploring more in the quantification level. But not everybody gets to that stage, and I understand that. You do, I think, need a certain baseline level of cultural understanding, shared understanding, to be able to get to that level of maturity for using this framework. But I just wanted to show you guys a little bit of what's possible out there, especially if you explore more this quantification path. But yeah, that's just a little bit of how I've used jobs to be done throughout my career. But handing it back off to Elaine. And you guys, if you have some questions, I'd love to talk about them.
Melissa, I think you have set the record for the most discussion points and the most questions during a presentation.
Oh, wow.
With this group. It's
I'm
on
excited.
fire
Okay.
over here. Yeah.
Yeah, the chat is super active. I love seeing that. We have a whole handful of questions. Maybe I'll hop over to share from the mural for just a moment. But Melissa, feel free to take back over the screen share. Jim, I noticed that you started out with a handful. Do you want to maybe get us started? And then let's turn it over
I
to
guess so.
Wolfgang.
I always take the oxygen out of the room, so I'll be brief. Well, my first one was a little sarcastic. You said, "Wait, you were skeptical about jobs to be done at first," and I realize a lot of people. But the reason why I asked that is because a lot of people are, right, particularly from backgrounds of CX or research or voice of customer or these other things. That, wait a minute, I've been doing this, or whatever the reason for that skepticism is. It's actually a quite common starting point for a lot of folks. And then in worst case scenario, it just gets dismissed.
Yeah.
Right. As we've been there, done that, or this is the same as the thing I've been doing or whatever. I just wanted to hear your journey going from to break that down, going from skeptic to now you're doing it all the time.
Yeah. And maybe some of you have had similar experiences, but I think it really just comes down to the similarity, right? It's like, hey, I do this. I own this. That's what I do, and I'm like, I already have enough time, just trying to do my own job. Please, don't add this other layer of this thing. And where does that come from? Well, yeah, because I just feel like I'm coming into a space where everybody's doing something. They already have a way of developing products, right? And just by me being there as a UX researcher is saying hey, I want to work with you guys, and the way for you to work with me is you have to change what you're doing so that I have a piece of the work, right? The effort. And that's it's hard. It's hard. It requiring change. We know behavioral change. It's hard. It's messy. It takes time. And so it comes, I think, from a layer of just insecurity, right? This was earlier on in my career. How do I define what it is that I do? Also, the specific context with it. Working jobs you've done doing UX period in a very conservative bank, and in the one of the most conservative layers of that bank, the corporate investment bank line of business, was hard. And so yeah, I think it does come from this I need to protect what it is that I do. Is this thing a threat to me, right? It feels like it wants to own some of the stuff, the work that I'm doing that I'm already trying so hard to protect. And I think there is a little bit of a layer there. And then also maybe it's the pain of learning something new on top of everything else that I'm trying to do. But if I'm being real, yeah, there's an emotional struggle, I think, there.
Hmm. Very interesting.
And as a researcher, I think you're uniquely tapped to be able to like see that emotional layer. Were you able to speak about it directly with people? How are they responding to this? Like, you're going to have to change the way you work.
Yeah, so sometimes I would try to fuss around a little bit with the language. Like Wolfram says, yeah, I sometimes I would not use the word job. I would say need, right? Just to be like, okay, that helps me get over this first hurdle a little bit faster. I don't care. I'll do it, right? And then maybe that's the reason someone said customer experience outcomes instead of jobs to be done at Amazon. I don't know. I don't know the story there. I don't know if anyone here does, but yeah, that helped a little bit. Just trying to think. Uh, yeah, that's just like the first thing that comes to mind.
At JP Morgan, were you doing qualitative interviews?
JP Morgan. I wasn't myself. We had brought in a consultancy who had done like a similar project before,
Mhm.
who did those. But I think they also leaned on existing research that we had. Like we did interviews with them as well.
Okay.
Like people on our team, I did interviews with them, the consultancy.
So in this instance, you were activating insights that had sort of previously been gathered, but
Hmm.
using the lens of jobs to be done to
Yes, and then
understand.
sorry to clarify, the consultancy themselves were going out there and doing
Mhm.
uh, the jobs interviews.
Okay, cool, cool. And then that kind of leads me into one of the next questions that we've had, which is how did you get to the 40 questions that you included in your survey at Bread?
With a lot of pain.
Tell us more.
So much pain. Yeah, I mean, I think the broad strokes there is we had kind of a core working team that was activated, was empowered, right, to try. And
Mhm.
that was the key piece. That was a beautiful, beautiful thing. Hey, you, I mean, I think that comes down to a little bit that this is a startup environment, right? It's like, hey, I have the trust to like, I'm just gonna try. And it's definitely not going to be perfect the first time out of the gate. But it's sketching out the first drafts of the job map, and in conversation, maybe we're going back to the primary data because we see some overlap. And does this feel right or does this feel right? Just sort of gut layer. And just that core working group of like 3 to 4 cross-functionally, us coming together and being like, yeah, we feel good about this, let's try this. And then it came down to 20, 20 job statements.
And this next question coming from Jim, what did you get wrong with the first quantification of those statements?
Yeah. I guess like honestly, a lot of it came down to just simple survey design, like which is always like, pilot your survey, pilot your interviews, because inevitably you will be posing questions that you think users will understand or respondents will understand in a specific way, and they won't. And so that's the opportunity for you to correct that. What else? Yeah, survey fatigue, right? Of course. You have all of these statements and you're asking them these questions and they're redundant. You have to go through all these 20
Mhm.
statements. And so that I knew early on this when I first launched it at Bread Finance that like this was going to be a problem. And especially when it came to Amazon, you think like I can't necessarily incentivize these because of the legal red tape there. How am I going to do this? I need to find a way to reduce this survey length. But yeah, that was a key piece that was
Mhm.
difficult.
And Jim, feel free to hop in at any point if you want to follow up on some of Melissa's comments.
Yeah, no, I want to hear some other questions from Wolfram, and I see some other ones there.
Yeah, I want Wolfram and Melissa to dig into some of the survey design together. Wolfram, you have some great questions, kind of building on what Melissa's been talking about. Can you maybe, Melissa, talk to us a little bit about how you got the participants? And then Wolfram, if at any point you want to hop in and share, please feel free to do so.
Well, the easiest one would be bread finance. Why? Because the users that I needed to survey are consumers. They're general consumers. They're, I don't know, 18 to 24, and maybe they shop at a beauty supply store like an Ulta or a Sephora or like that. Of course, B2C is going to just be easier, almost definitely. But if it's not, um, and this is more general, I don't think it's just like jobs to be done specific, but yeah, I would try to use existing pipelines. Marketing already has this channel to, you know, sellers on Amazon that they're using, and they have their own sheet, and I can use that to get access to it. But yeah, using existing relationships, building off of them. The trade-off is, though, you have to get them to share access with you. And so you have to entice them sometimes with like marketing, showing them, hey, I'm going to have insights for you about your job listing page. Isn't that exciting for you? Can you share your participant list with me? So kind of like tricks like that. But yeah, it's very common UX research marketing, that initial piece of like, how do I get access to the people? Yeah. For quantification, that's almost one of your first hurdles.
And so I'm curious, for everybody, for the audience, like what sort of, how does that resonate with your own experience in terms of getting participants for surveys? Like, is it something as simple, like we recently worked on a project where we've been sharing out a survey, just a link on LinkedIn. So we're not, kind of screening maybe as actively, like we're just sort of working within our network and understanding that that's kind of the screening criteria. I love the suggestion, working with marketing and sh telling them that if they share this information, you'll be able to share insights with them. Has anybody else done anything similar to sort
Well,
of
I
get that
can say that was one of
collaboration?
the first time I did a big quant survey. The one mistake that we did was we just sent it to a very, very diverse group of people. And the problem with that is what happens is the scores then all tend to go to the middle.
Mm-hmm.
We ended up with 11s, 10s, and 9s for 50 statements. They were all within that band. And then if you looked at who was actually doing the survey, what you realized was we went too broad, and we weren't careful about defining and recruiting the job performers that we were looking at. So then we ended up getting these scores that just went to the middle. And I'm doing that right now with Scott right now. Elaine, I don't know if you guys follow me on LinkedIn, but we're doing a survey and we're going out on LinkedIn. And I think that's going to affect the results when you just kind of do it that way. But when you do, the thing is, when you do the analysis, you have to realize that and and factor that into the analysis.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm curious what Dom thinks
Or-
about what I just said.
Oh,
Yes.
yeah. Hi, Dom.
He got me just as I was unmuting. Yeah, definitely want to use cluster analysis,
Yeah.
segmentation of that audience. Yeah, because then you really tease apart, well, what are the groups of people that answer differently, and you
Right.
learn something about them. But yeah, something else you touched on too, I was going to say was this thing about job titles, because a lot of times that's what you
Mhm.
get from product managers and stuff is, well, it's this job title, that's the person that I'm looking for. It's like, no, you want the job performers, anybody who's doing these things,
Right.
doing them now or has a need to
Yeah.
do these things, and they're not doing them now because there is an appropriate solution out there for them. It's unsolved for that use case. And so you want to use that as your screening criteria. And then you come up with people as like, why did we get this person with this job title and everything? Well, look at how they answered stuff. Look what they're doing, the
Mhm.
other stuff to characterize them. And you see that there's more audience out there, more target for your solution if you focus on the right solution to solving
Mhm.
that problem.
Dom, do you add questions then at the survey to get some more dimensions about them so that you then know like they work at a big company and they have these jobs and you know what I mean? So that you then have
Yeah.
levers to segment by, right?
Yeah, at the end of the questionnaire, usually, so the
Yeah,
screening and then get right into
right,
the important stuff you want to measure. And at the
right,
end, you're doing the profiling. And
right,
so all the things in the profiling should be assumptions about, well, what would,
right,
make this, the job performer be important to them? Why would they have different types of answers
right.
in rating different jobs? Yeah.
Right. And the wider that you go, I think the more important those profiling questions then become.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and I would add that marketing, sales can be really good partners for that because they have existing segmentation. They might have existing personas that can help you like really be concise about how many profile questions you're adding. Because again, you need to be careful with adding more questions because it introduces additional risk of drop off, survey fatigue, etc.
Hmm.
I want to also have Wolfram dig into this question that I have here, Melissa, because I sort of had a similar thought when you were going through and kind of sharing some of the screens of the surveys, and how did you go about structuring the job stories or the job statements that you used? And then Wolfram, I'm curious with your experience because I know you have a lot of this, also structuring job statements for the surveys. What kind of challenges, how do you get consistency? When you're knee deep in the language that you're using, it becomes there's like a level of abstraction sometimes in research that I struggle with. So how are you achieving that sort of ideal formulation for the questions themselves?
For me it was just I think it was just like a simple like Likert, like a agreement scale, like um, to
Yeah,
what
the
degree.
job st are you surveying with job stories, like where it's just a statement of the sort of functional or
Yes,
focus job?
directly. Yeah,
Yeah.
directly. Hmm.
And so then where did the outcome statements sort of come into the process for you? Or like
Sorry, I don't know the difference, I guess.
how are you kind of measuring in using language, how are you measuring the functional or focus job? Like
Uh,
what is the likelihood of achieving this or how to minimize or maximize
oh,
certain
sure, sure, sure.
outcomes?
That was, please, something like, to what degree, do you agree or disagree? I would never write it like that. Please don't use that language. That's terrible. Um, with the following needs,
Hmm.
and then return something I no longer want.
Hmm.
Um, find out more about this solution, like the actual job statement. So it's just like pretty generic way. Yeah, again, that just like the ranking the level of agreement
Hmm.
basically, and then just exposing the actual job statements as they're written.
Hmm. Nice. And Wolfram, how does that kind of compare to your experience writing the statements for a survey?
Yeah, thanks by the way, Melissa, very interesting. So we usually use the outcomes or need statements we ask for because they are pretty specific. And that's why I was asking and we use job stories to summarize a bunch of need statements. Like if
Oh,
we
okay.
have 10
Not
need
tried that.
statements, specific need statements, and we need to communicate it to colleagues. We don't share all the need statements, could be overwhelming because sometimes we have 50 or 100. We summarize clusters of needs and so which is easier to communicate because they know user stories maybe already, then they know the format. That's why we use job stories.
Hmm.
That's why I was asking if you put or why you put job stories to the questionnaire and not need statements. That was actually my question.
So, and I'm sorry, I think I guess I use a little bit different language because I've been so steeped in the CXO's world, so that I'm signaling like that's what's going on. I will say another way we experimenting with dealing with this, right? Which also touches on Jonathan's point about survey fatigue. One thing that we did try was upfront saying like, which of these at the level of the like journey phase, right? So whether it's discover, use, maintain that level, which of these parts do you work in or do you touch or are important to you, which then screens just those job statements that live within that bucket.
Mhm.
So that's one way to do it. But of course, trade-offs. I'm not seeing relatively against like all of the possible job statements which are more important to you. And then we did find a way to address that issue with revised quantification modeling. But yeah, that is one way we did try experimenting with.
That reminds me of something I just saw recently from our friends Jan Vermouth and Beat Walter from Venbridge. And what they did was they had a job map, high level, I don't know, 6 or so different phases in the job. And the way that they structured the survey was to present that job step and then a block of outcome statements all at once that said, how important are these things to you? In like a table, you ever see those surveys where you get a table and you can check them off?
Yep.
And what they did was they cycled through that twice. The first time was, when you're doing this, how important are these things for you? Boom,
Yep,
boom, boom,
yep.
boom. And then when you're doing this, how important are these things for you, right? So you had a block of 5 or 10 statements at once. And what that did was made the scannability of it and just the pattern of it, right? I just have to scan the thing and then put a score, scan and score, scan and score. And it actually accelerated the survey taking. So they're able to get more statements in.
I think another really powerful method is max diff.
Okay, I've seen
You're
that
kind
too.
of right, you're just exposing 2 statements at a time, head to
Right.
head. And then again, 2 statements at a time,
Right.
but the model in the back is doing all the work of
Right.
randomizing and knowing how to create, like exposing which 2 statements at a time to create that ranking. And that's another really powerful way.
Does that
to
help
do
get
that.
through them quicker though, or is that longer?
Yes. No,
It's
it's much
quicker.
faster. Yeah.
Is it okay? And I know
Yeah,
Wolfram,
I think
don't
it's
you?
often
Okay,
it's
go ahead,
often
Dom. I want to
faster.
hear. Yeah, go ahead, Dom.
Yeah, and next, because they get into a rhythm, and so they can go
Right.
through quite a bit of those. And even
Yeah.
though they're seeing presentation of those multiple times, but there's a couple of, a few different max diff, kind of adaptive max diff, bandit max diff, other things that
Yeah.
where you're kind of asking them some stuff and prioritizing what to show them more
Right.
trade-offs with. And so it's adapting, and you can get through more statements with less presentations and still get good scores. Yeah.
Yeah, and I found that number like 40 items. You can't have a survey with 40 items, but they're not discrete questions with different answers that you have to read through every question and answer. And I find
Yeah.
like what I just described from Venbridge or Max Diff, but I know Wolfram, don't you cluster them by minimize the time it takes and then you list all the time things, right? So you're in the mode of time it takes to do this, boom, 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 and then you close. So I think there's a lot of mechanical things that you can do in the survey to make 40 items only takes 7 minutes to kind of get through, right? Right, Wolfram? Is that what you do?
Yes, true. So we cluster it by minimize the time it takes, minimize the effort, and maximize the likelihood. And we are now moving, or we moved from drop downs to radio buttons. So because it's easier
Uh-huh.
to respond, it's quick. It's just quicker.
Right.
Love a radio button.
How many items can you get through in 10 minutes, Wolfram, on your surveys?
I would say we ask for, so that's what I have from you. So we don't use more than 40 to 50 statements.
40 to 50, yeah.
And I think that takes around 10 to 15 minutes, depends. Yeah. And that's already, you have to pre-select because we usually have 100 and you cannot put 100 statements into a survey. So it's better to have 30 instead of 40, but yeah, well.
Okay.
I think the other level, and Melissa's touched on this too, is that, and like we were talking about screening, but sometimes we'll have a block of, how important to your job are doing these kind of job categories of things, a higher level story summarized you run the risk of maybe there's some things you want to test underneath there that, might not come to mind when they're saying that, but you're kind of screening those people that, well, there's got to be some things here that are important to you. Otherwise, this survey is irrelevant to you. You're not who we're looking for, right?
Yeah.
And then they go into the survey and they're seeing blocks of the detailed, jobs questions, outcomes, and stuff based on what they screened in for. So, then you're partial profiling of, who's answering what part of stuff and what's relevant to them. You just have to be careful in the analysis afterwards. And if you're going to like cluster those people, then you have to make some assumptions about that. Well, the things that they said at the beginning were important. Well, none of those things were important.
Yeah.
Some stuff like that. Yeah.
42 says Jay.
Everybody agree?
I was
We have
I was
go ahead.
thinking about what Wolfram was bringing up too, though. So I do focus more on job statements, I'd call them, not really stories. They are more need statements, I guess, but more so than outcomes, where I'm trying to find a measurement, or a threshold or something like that. Because I feel like if I prioritize the jobs and get clarity on what the solution is, then when we start to try to figure out, well, how to solve it, then we could be much more concrete about some of the specific outcomes, the detailed steps involved, right? Or how would you measure this? How much is enough, to get to that level? So do that as a second phase then afterwards,
Right.
and you could be more focused on the top priorities.
Yeah. I just had that conversation with Scott Burleson, who's been on the show. Has he been on the show twice, I think now, as a guest, right? Author of the Jobs to Be Done Pyramid. If you guys don't know the Jobs to Be Done Pyramid, check that out from Scott Burleson. And we're running a survey right now. And, following the ODI approach, I was like, no, those statements have to be singular, right? But he put a whole bunch together with ands. And I said, Scott, you can't do that. And he said, no, what we're going to do is minimize the number of items on the survey. And if that thing arises, then it's our job to sort out which they responded to. And I think that's what you were saying, Dom, is that you can get a signal at a higher level. And then you, as the analyst or the researcher, you might have to either do subsidiary research, subsequent research, or use what you have to unpack what that was, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yep.
All right. Any other themes in here, Elaine, that maybe we can touch on? We got 5 more minutes.
Yeah. First of all, if anybody has a question, they want to just hop on for the last few minutes, please feel free to do so. Um, Melissa and I were talking a little bit at the start of today's meeting about leveling. And that's, an issue that Jim and I are also kind of running into with one of our coaching clients right now is that you might have different teams across the organization working at different levels of scope or with different levels of maturity. And so, Melissa, I'm curious if you just have any takeaways on that. And that issue that we can kind of noodle on or might help kind of guide the conversation with clients.
Yeah, I guess for my own self, I do feel like there is a way to get at that mathematically, and it's something that I've worked with a statistician on, a way to say like, okay, yeah, get some ranking or composite score, but then looking at, I guess, a threshold of like similarity in the scoring helps combine them or collapse them in a way that you can feel more confident in. I think that is one way. I would love to play with that a little bit more in the future, but other than that, yeah, having a standardized rubric. Building the rubric, I think, helps. Showing people examples of why, like, printing the return label might not be the right level we want to be at. I mean, I think, like, I'm sure you guys work on this all the time too. Actually, I'm curious. I'd love to hear from you guys. How do you deal with that?
I think the closest thing that I can say we do is the standardized rubric. In my instance, we often end up with I hear it through the lens of working with like jobs ecosystems. So you have lots of different teams kind of competing to like, not necessarily competing, but contributing the focus job that is relevant to the segment that they're working with or the product space that they're in. Um, that seems to me to be to solve like the biggest problem that we run into with our coaching clients.
Got it. Yeah.
Yeah, we had different teams that, wanted to kind of tailor their own flavor. So, like the B2B, the things that we were talking about, sometimes they aren't the person making the choice of, well, I'm buying this software, I'm the purchaser, I'm the decision maker. It's like, I've got this to work with. And so, how do I answer satisfaction, or what are we trying to get at? We found a good question for them was, how efficient is it? Or how effective is it for you to get what you need done, right? And so they're evaluating from a more specific point of view, or if we were in a group that's doing like a lot of mobile stuff is very, immediate, short, right? And so there's a lot of frequency to it. Now, how often you do it can be a great enhancer for how important it is. It's really important for me to set up my phone right. But then after I set it up once, I don't do it again for, 2 years, whatever. But the things I do daily or, many times a day that I'm in always, that can have an emphasis, the frequency on top of importance. Um, so, some extra criteria variations on all the themes.
The other thing I wanted to that occurred to me as well is Melissa, you really hit this like the level of excitement that you have when you're working with a sort of an empowered core group. And I know especially like my experiences working in corporations, I often argue for like more of a lattice structure where you have like your traditional silos that are often like skill or functional based. And then you have groups that are working on maybe like in my instance, it was asset allocation. We had different asset allocation dashboards in every product. And so I advocated for like a lateral group of the teams, even though we were on different product teams, so that we were connecting it like and creating this more of a lattice scaffolding between the orgs. And I think that's one of the things that empowered core groups can do really well as also.
Yeah, I think you have to have that to some degree. You have to have that like horizontal view, or you're not going to get there. I think that's just the nature of how a lot of product orgs are typically designed. They're organized by I guess,
The
for the
product.
purposes of engineering the work product that makes the most sense. That's my understanding. Not everybody has that, right? But we all know just looking horizontally, just writing that down unlocks so much, just the nature of that, right?
Yeah.
I do want to just reiterate, although I can't share the specifics of it, we did find a way to move beyond importance and satisfaction as the main scores. We found a replacement or a couple replacements actually for importance specifically that were a lot more powerful when it came down to the output of that. But
Mhm.
the only thing I can hint at is like pay attention to the metrics that you're already collecting that are tied closely to existing user behavior.
Mhm. Nice. We are at time. Thank you everybody for joining us today.